Right, hello. I'm doing a meta prediction which I think is quite early. So in case like a 2K or something comes out and all of my opinions are invalid, but I've had to start testing because I will be attending Seattle. And on the screen I've got Las Vegas as day two meta game. 'Cause it's very good to see what converted from day one to day two. And I've been focusing in mainly on Vegas's data because I mean, we could see from Birmingham to Vegas, there was a lot less green still, and it just seems there is a different in play style between Europe and the US, and that's sort of just always been a running theme in every TCG I've ever played. Some games, if you've ever played Pokemon, the sets come out in Japan first, and they get to play the game. So the rest of the world knows what the cards are going to be and what the meta is going to be like. But sometimes it doesn't land out that way because just people in America, people in Europe play the game differently and enjoy different decks and see the value in different cards. I don't know why I'm over explaining that, but I'm just trying to say there is a different regional difference. So yeah, I'm just going to be focusing in on the Las Vegas data mainly, and looking at it, yeah, it's not far from what we expected to see with Ruby Sapphire being at the top. I mean, probably everyone's seen these hanging around. Ruby Amethyst doing quite well, and the Emerald Steel doing quite well. I think the list sort of at the bottom here, I've made a note of trying to get games into them with whatever deck I end up bringing because, as I say, I'm still in the realms of I don't particularly know what I want to bring. Maybe I'm not feeling 100% on bringing Blue Steel again. There's a few little ideas. I mean, I quite like the idea of just playing hyper aggro and just trying my best, because especially as I'm going to a different country or a different time zone, I'll be a little bit tired and maybe not performing at 100% what I could be performing at, but I could also be giving that as just an excuse. So there's a few decks, I mean, on my other screen. I've got loads that I've been trying out. I've been trying out Lorcana deck lists, green purple as well, which I think is really cool. Green purple I've always just sort of written off as it's a discardy sort of different version of RP, and I'd rather just play RP. But to be honest with you, I've also been enjoying Lorcana deck lists green purple recently. It's got a nice playstyle to it, and it's quite fresh to me. And it was just really fun to put the Merfolks back in. Sky's no wheel as well. So yeah, just going back to my original point though, looking at meta shares, I did have to whatever deck I'm playing, I've tried it into all of these. So it's like if I picked Hyper Aggro, it'd be like actually into Ruby Steel. I don't expect to see like 9 or 3 or whatever rounds of Ruby Steel, but I expect to maybe see possibly one. You know, there's still a chance there. One made day two. And you just don't want to get caught out, and especially in a two-game format where a two-round, sorry, yeah, two-game format, I think is what it's called, where just getting O2'd by some deck that you're probably undervaluing because you haven't got any practice into it, just doesn't feel great. So yeah, I think maybe the percentages is the best way to look at how much effort you should put into those matchup practices. So definitely like try get some games into Balapa and stuff like that would be my opinion. And Blue Steel, I know there's still diehard Blue Steels. I'm sure Lamb's going as well. I'm sure he'll probably make day two. So he'll be hovering out at the top tables. And of course, I think there's still loads of great things that Blue Steel can do. I think it definitely can have a run where it can get into the top cut. In my opinion, I've sort of landed on Blue Steel. It doesn't have particularly like horrible matchups. Okay, Ruby Sapphire, yeah, are still pretty bad, but overall, the things that are troubling it is its issues, of course, with Daisy. If they're just to go wide with Daisies, that's just a lot of turns of questing, and then a wheel happens, and then all of that card advantage is gone. Um, Locations and purple decks. Ruby Amethyst, of course, it shines the most because they can protect it with Be Prepared and the Red Ladies and all that stuff. But of course, I've seen it in purple steel as well. Just if you're on the draw and they're able to get a location out, and then maybe put some steel removal out or chi and pile, whatever. It's just like, oh, I'm gonna lose this one, and I really shouldn't have done. But it's just because I'm on the draw and I can't deal with locations very efficiently. So that's sort of my opinion on where Blue Steel is at, and why. Of course, I'm still trying it. I'm definitely trying Sky's No Wheel, I think is really cool, and I think there's definitely in an Emerald room that deck just overperforms. It does really well. I mean, they've got basically nothing to take from your hand. Like there's three grab your swords, so out of 60 cards, like what is the percent chance of them getting one of those three is very low. But they'll still go for the check because they think you're blue steel and they think you have a wheel or you have a let it go or whatever. So they'll always check your hand. But you won't have anything in there. So there's loads of benefits to it, but there are some things I just think I know I'm going to face against the Ruby Sapphire matchup where I just confidently can't say I can 2-0 that. On the draw, it just feels like I'm not, because you need to go under them really on the draw. You just kind of start hitting them very hard with stuff and make them react to you, like RP does, where it just starts Flynn seesawing and just starts going wide, brawls a Hiram to slow them down a little bit and try catch up to their lead for just being on the play. And I can't seem to do that with Sapphire Steel. So yeah, it's been quite rough, and I know I'd play against it. I mean, look at that percentage of the top cut it took, and I don't think that's going to be changing with this set. People, it's just tried and true that Ruby Sapphire is strong right now, and it's really good. It can answer anything in the meta, really. So yeah, of course, Sapphire Steel is like the deck I play, so it's definitely going to be a choice for me. I mentioned about hyper aggro as well. I think there is completely a run where you can just get that handed to you. If you go into no steel matchups, and even if they have steel matchups, I think you're fine. Against this sort of the discard decks as well, I tend to feel like by the time they've set things up, you can sort of get a lot of work done. And if they do have Ursula at the Storm Rage on, that's going to hurt. But if you're going Daisy and some other two or to three other three health characters across the board, like your Baloo's out and stuff like that, it's just an awkward board. They're going to have to use strength instead and deny the card draw. Not deny it, but they're just going to lack two cards from that, and then the follow up has to be more removal that they find in their hand, and discarding won't particularly do too much. They can't really invest into that because they know you're just going to dump your hand, then Chromacon and play the cards that you get top decked. So it doesn't feel bad really, and I feel like there is definitely a run where you can get hyper aggro into the top cut. I mean, there you go, 4 people did it in Vegas. So that's another one that I've been testing. I've been testing one of the lists from Vegas, and Amber Emerald. I think this deck is just understated how good it is. I think it does take a lot of practice. I think, of course, when it runs smoothly, it's just gonna clear people out. And if you're getting the Diablo shifts, moves to Cove, Prince John, you have forgotten me, it just wipes you out. It's learning how to play when the deck hasn't been working. It's optimally 100%. I think that's where a lot of players fall behind, because if you don't get that Diablo shift and you're trying to get your Under the Sea Keeda thing going off, and maybe you haven't got that much discard action going on because you've been failing hand checks, bare necessities, and Ursula, it's how to manage those games. If you can do that, there's loads of amazing players that can. It's definitely a 2-0 deck. It's definitely really worth playing, and I'm surprised to only see it at 8%. I really thought it was going to be higher than that, possibly like around the Amber Steel region at maybe at 13% with the Amber Emerald, with the Amethyst Emerald as well. And I don't know if this is my opinion, but in Europe, it always feels like Amethyst Emerald is just a lot more popular. I don't know if that's because Artabax's reach is very big in Europe, but it just feels like that deck is just loved here. And I just don't particularly see Americans talking about how great it is, because it is great. You have now two really big shift targets with the Clarabelle and the Ursula, and they both do awesome things, especially on the turn they're played. It's still got 8 into the top card, but I don't know. I always get this impression that Americans aren't particularly big on Amethyst Emerald. But please, anyone who's watching this video, let me know that I'm wrong on that, because I just don't see it as talked about as much. I see it represented here for sure, but I just don't see it mentioned as much. Yeah, and with Amber Steel, I don't know if a lot of people after the I think a lot of them turned up. I can't remember what the day one meta share was, but I think a lot of them turned up, and the same was with Birmingham. A lot of them did turn up, and the deck didn't perform well enough, I think, for most people. And someone said to me, if you have to be one of the best Amber Steel players to basically pilot that deck to a top cut. On the play, I think you just 100% go over them, and you can lock that win in with the Whole New World and Flood and Peats and Bare Necessities, and basically lock them out of the game whilst you turn sideways. So I think people will still bring it if they have it built. It was fairly expensive to make as well. So if you're an Amethyst Steel player, you're probably still going to bring it. But in my opinion, I tend to see that percentage drop a little bit. I think it will have a little bit less of an attendance. It's definitely still a matchup you should practice 100% and be ready for that. But I don't know. I have this opinion that it's going to go down a little bit, and especially with Emerald Steel rocking up so high, and I'll get onto that one in a second. I think because the Emerald Steel matchup's so bad, in my personal opinion, whenever I play Emerald Steel into Amber Steel, I can just 2-0 that all day, because once you get the muses down, they're going to have nothing for you. They're probably going to want to wheel, and they're just going to give you more tools to work with. And if they don't wheel, they're just going to gas out and die. They can use Bruno, they can use Sudden Chill, and then they can bounce all your little things back to hand. And they've got actual steel removal as well. Then they just discard you and lock you out of the game. So I think I'm expecting to see Amber Steel to drop down in the meta shares on this, and Emerald Steel to, of course, rise up. Now it's just been proven that it's really, really good. I'm expecting to see it just played a lot more. If a deck wins a regional, people are going to want to net deck it and want to play it. And it didn't just win a regional; it like sort of dominated the top cut as well. There was loads of it in the top cut. I got 9 here, and going on as well up to like the top 16 as well, and stuff like that. There was loads of them still playing. And the decks seemed fairly, easy to not easy to run. I think if you miss the Diablo shift, this can be hard to play. But I really think the Emerald Steel percentage is going to rise. I think Amethyst Ruby is going to stay exactly the same as it always does. It's just that deck that everything's around. And I won't lie, I've been playing some games as well. It was the deck that I played in set 2. I did play it in set 1, but like let's be honest, that doesn't matter because like no one's using Magic Mirror anymore. But yeah, it's always consistent. It's really easy to say. It's blind match. Just find your Flynn Sisu, and then anything else is bonus. Like if you find a brawl or you find a rabbit or whatever like that. But in a blind thing, it's always just I'm going to find Flynn Sisu, find one drop, just find a curve basically. It's very easy to tell any player to just do that to find that curve, and especially what I felt like was if I was playing a deck like Blue Steel where I needed to very focus in on the mulligan, especially in Birmingham, I had to focus in on the mulligan and basically predict what the matchup was going to be, what cards I could have in my hand, what cards I couldn't have in my hand. If it was a green deck, I can have XYZ. If it wasn't, I could have XYZ. And that kind of drops you the game because then you play against RP and they're just like, and I'm going to do 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop, and I'm just going to play curve because, they might keep a Friends on the Other Side in hand, but let's be honest, you can just ink that and you'd never keep a B prep in hand. And all the locations you wouldn't tend to keep in your mulligan, so, you don't really need to plan against bare necessities there. It's got a simple curve. I think it's just generally going to stay where it is and maybe even perform a little bit better, a little bit worse. But I don't think the Emerald Steel turnout actually hits it either that much. Just playing into that matchup, yes, there's definitely some games where they just blow you out and absolutely stomp you out of the game because they get the Diablo shift out. They discard you down heavily, and then you're locked out of the game. But sometimes what I'm going back to my original point of Amethyst Ruby is Amethyst Ruby just has to play its standard game plan. It just has to curve out, and if it doesn't want to get discarded heavy, it just doesn't play characters. It just inks them instead. Gets the rabbits, starts drawing cards, then gets the red ladies out, then gets B prep, and then it's back in the game. Whereas Emerald Steel has to work, I would say, potentially a lot harder to win the matchup. It's very much their matchup to take. It's very much their 2-0 to have if they want it, but they need to really focus in on getting the discard down, just basically locking you out of the game. And I think my opinion on the matchup is Emerald still has to put a lot more work in, whilst Amethyst Ruby can just put the same level of effort as they put into the other matchups. Maybe a little bit different because they've got like not ink stuff or ink friends, or, you know what I mean? But I think overall, it requires the Emerald Steel player to just put a lot more work in, but it's definitely there to 2-0 if they want it. And at this level, at regional gameplay, you're going to have people who are trying their best to try and win and get day 2. And Ruby Sapphire, yeah, I think Ruby Sapphire, whenever you talk to a player, they tend to play it on the play, on the draw. They say, of course, they want on the plays, they can ramp 2 first and just go over you, but on the draw it should be fine because they're used to ramp. I don't think there's any matchup here where they, besides maybe Ruby Amethyst, where they really hate it. But even the Ruby Amethyst one, if they really don't like it, they can start using things like 2-drops and stuff like that, like Pegasus, if they want to. I don't really know where Ruby Sapphire's deck building is at recently. But they still have answers for it, or they can just take the Ruby Amethyst matchups as 1-1s and walk away from it. But yeah, I think they're still in an amazing spot. It's definitely going to be at that exact same percentage. I think as well now, when I watch the streams and watch people play, there was a lot of times where the Ruby Sapphire player, maybe because they just hadn't practiced into Emerald Steel, didn't particularly know how to play the matchup, and they were just quilling their cards, and then they were stuck at like 6 ink top decking. Whereas at this point, you've got to have gone back to your testing groups and gone back to your locals and said, like, right, let's play some games into Emerald Steel, because I don't actually know what they do anymore since Bucky's gone. So yeah, I definitely think that will be at the exact same percentage, maybe even perform better, because now it just has a better view of the meta and knows what's good and what's bad and how to play it. But I think, yeah, overall, if I was to look at this and say how would I amend it to a day 2 for Seattle, it would be Ruby Sapphire still at the top with a large percentage, possibly Emerald Steel above the Amethyst Ruby. Amethyst Ruby, of course, third. So those 3 locked in, maybe the Amethyst Ruby, Emerald Steel moving around a little bit. I think Amethyst Emerald would bump up, and I think Amber Emerald as well would bump up as well. And I think Amber Steel might lock down to the lowest of the top tier decks, really. So if that makes sense to you, Ruby Sapphire, Emerald, Amethyst Emerald, amethyst ruby, sorry, emerald steel, amber steel, amethyst emerald, and amber emerald. I think amber steel ranks as the lowest, in my opinion, of those top tier meta decks because I just every time I play it as well, I know I don't play it 100% right. I'm not an amber steel player, but I just think it doesn't have as good a matchups. It has like no 2-0 instant wins. You have to work very hard to get your games on the draw to win. Um, I just think, yeah, that's going to be a very. It's going to turn up, of course. People are going to love it. People love Amber Steel, but I think it's going to rock at the bottom of the top tier decks. And then at the bottom, yeah, I think I maybe because I spend a lot of time in the Sapphire Steel zones and like talking to people about the deck, they've got a lot of interesting stuff there. They've got no wheels, wheel versions. Some people are still rocking with the cottage. People have just gone completely off the wall and done some amazing things with that deck. Looking at cards like Merlin and Aurora, which I don't stand by, but I think in a format where you have to play 100% perfectly, you could easily get caught off by a card like Merlin and find something that's the exact answer to the matchup with the Shift Merlin card. So I think that'll be interesting, and I think that will have maybe bump up a bit higher than the Amber Amethyst deck. I think at this point as well, we should all just know how to deal with aggro and at least get 1/1s from it. So I think that will maybe not get a day 2 turnout as much. But we'll see. And at the bottom tables, at the bottom percentage, I don't know. I think that's going to be very similar to as it was. Maybe Blurple drops down, maybe Ruby still goes up. But in my opinion, I don't have much thought on that 2% part down there. But yeah, that's sort of my predictions on Vegas, not Vegas, sorry, that's happened on Seattle and what's going to happen at their day 2. And again, yeah, I'm trying to think about all of that as I play decks. I just play a lot of Lorcana, so I feel very confident to not say I've locked in the deck yet because we still do have a couple weeks or a little bit of time until I can just lock in and I just end up playing everything. And it's good to play decks from different angles and find out what every matchup is and be like, right, this deck usually stomps me all the time. I need to know what decks it loses to because then I know that they might not bring that deck because they're like, there's going to be a lot of that deck that they lose to and not want to play it. And, you can overthink it, but at the end of the day, I'll just probably pick the one I'm most confident on. But yeah, that's my thoughts on predicting the meta for Seattle.